What's up, boxing fans? This is TBE Boxing, back at you again. Today's topic, Jake Paul and Ben Askren's 1.5 million pay-per-view buys expose the myth of Errol Spence being a pay-per-view star. Let's chop it up and see what it's all about.
Got the money for minutes, pretty bitch, gotta show me titties. This is the life I chose, on the block with the pole, This is the life that I chose, on the block with the pole, Thug like you for riches, Thug like you for riches, Pretty bitch, show me titties, And I got the glazzy run up on me, I'ma make you get it. I'ma make you get it.
Okay, boxing fans, let's talk some boxing. We're gonna chop up some boxing today. All right, so there was a night of a lot of fights. We saw many fights on, but the one we're going to talk about is the Jake Paul Ben Askren fight. You all know, Jake Paul knocked out former MMA wrestler Ben Askren in the first round in a highly anticipated fight that we saw. You can tell by the pay-per-view buys that it was highly anticipated. I mean, according to the pay-per-view numbers, we see that Jake Paul and Ben Askren's fight is, so far has done 1.5 million pay-per-view buys, and we are hearing that it's expected to reach 2 million pay-per-view buys, possibly. Okay, so what does that say about boxing? Currently, I mean, at the end of the day, we know that boxing is struggling when it comes to pay-per-view. We also know that MMA and MMA is doing a little better than boxing when it comes to pay-per-view. Actually, a lot better than boxing. Okay, and so I figure we need to talk about that, because at the end of the day, we always talk about certain people being pay-per-view stars in boxing, and the biggest example of that is Errol Spence, because we hear from the LDBC and the Errol Spence fanboys, like the people like Blue Blood Sports and Phantom Boxing. They out there calling Errol Spence a pay-per-view star. They're talking about how because of the pandemic, the numbers that Errol Spence is putting out, 250,000, 200,000 pay-per-view buys, 360,000 at his highest with the Mikey Garcia fight. They're saying that those are the pay-per-view star numbers nowadays because of the pandemic, and people are not going to get any higher than that. But we see that's the total nonsense. Excuse me. As you can see from the numbers from UFC and MMA, we see that these guys are doing close to 1 million pay-per-view buys regularly, and we also see now with this Jake Paul, it's the second time we're seeing that did over 1 million pay-per-view buys. This is 1.5 million pay-per-view buys by Jake Paul and Ben Askren, and so this whole idea, that the numbers, pay-per-view numbers, that Errol Spence is putting out, those are good numbers, or that those are high numbers, or those numbers are the best you can expect during a pandemic, and that people that's putting out those kind of numbers are the new pay-per-view star. We see that it's total nonsense. Okay, because here it is, Jake Paul is doing 1.5 million pay-per-view buys. That's expected to reach 2 million pay-per-view buys eventually, from what we're hearing. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves, who is the real pay-per-view star? Well, clearly, we can see that Jake Paul is obviously a pay-per-view star, and as for Errol Spence, he's not even close to being a pay-per-view star. Now, I put out a video previously about Errol Spence, the myth of Errol Spence being a pay-per-view star, okay? And I got a lot of feedback on that video. People saying, I was hating on Errol Spence, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. But, it is what it is. I was just, stating the facts. And, at the end of the day, we can see again here with these numbers that Jake Paul is putting out. Okay, I mean, we have to understand something, people. Jake Paul is not even he's a boxer, but he's a rookie boxer. Okay, He's an amateur, basically. Okay, and he's boxing people. Well, in this fight, he actually boxed a real fighter in Ben Askren, who was a champion in MMA. But you know, he was never really known for being, his boxing skill. As a matter of fact, Ben Askren was known more for not having boxing skill. That's one of his, he was well known for that. So we can see that the fact that we have a guy who's basically a YouTuber in Jake Paul getting these kind of numbers, 1.5 million pay-per-view views, is basically exposing, and emphasizing what I was talking about, which is the myth of Errol Spence being a pay-per-view star. It's a myth, okay? And this just exposing that right now. So we see this. I mean, at this rate, and and we have to ask ourselves, well, why is this? Because at the end of the day, boxing is not putting on the fights that people want to see. People wanted to see this Jake Paul Ben Askren fight. People actually wanted to see it. Okay, they actually wanted to see this fight, and so they spent their money on this fight. Okay, as we can see. But the fights that we're seeing from boxing, a lot of these boxing matches, especially from the PBC, are just merry-go-round. The same guys all the time. Nothing exciting. Fights that we all know who's going to win the fight before the fight even starts. I mean, in this fight with Jake Paul and Ben Askren, there was actually an element of surprise as to who. Nobody knew who was going to win this fight. A lot of people were saying Jake Paul was going to win. A lot of people were saying Ben Askren was going to win. But there was generally, basically, there was like an unknown quantity there in terms of who's going to win the fight. So there was generally, definitely a question as to who would win the fight. Okay, nobody really actually knew. Many people had guesses, or many people speculated, but nobody really knew who was going to win. And so we saw that the people out there, the casual fans, we saw that they put their money up, and the rest is history. 1.5 million pay-per-view buys going on 2 million pay-per-view buys. So again, we're seeing Jake Paul being he's basically a pay-per-view star in the making at this point. Okay, this is the second pay-per-view that did over 1 million pay-per-views. Okay, pay-per-view buy. So, but one thing we can say, okay, and that is that Jake Paul is really following the blueprint that was laid down by Floyd Mayweather. Okay, man, we saw in the Jake Paul fight, you had Snoop Dogg there, you had Justin Bieber there. Okay, he was performing. I mean, you remember when Mayweather used to have these guys walk out, doing his ring walk and play their music doing his ring walk. Like he did it with Justin Bieber before. Justin Bieber used to come out for a lot of Mayweather's fights. Okay, so we can see that Triller, I guess they're following they're basically following the blueprint that was laid out by Mayweather. Now instead of just having Justin Bieber come out and do a ring walk with Jake Paul or whatever, they actually had him perform, and then they had Snoop Dogg announcing as an announcer or as a pundit. And the fight. So I mean, they're doing unorthodox things when it comes to boxing, and they're getting results. Okay, so they have a lot of people there. They had a whole bunch of different entertainers there, and they actually have them performing. So I think it's actually a great model in what they're doing. Again, this was started by Mayweather with bringing these people out, different entertainers out for his ring walk, but here in the case of Triller bringing these people to actually perform, which is great. So it looks like Triller is doing something innovative when it comes to boxing, and it's paying results for them, okay, and for their fighters, and so it's it's pretty interesting. But anyway, back to the this whole pay-per-view thing. So these numbers basically speak for themselves. Okay. Again, look at the numbers. It's right there in front of you. 1,500,000 pay-per-view buys as opposed to 360,000 pay-per-view buys. And we see that, and it's not just Errol Spence, but it's other boxers, Charlos, their pay-per-view buys were very low. Terence Crawford, his pay-per-view buys were low. Errol Spence, was basically the best of them in terms of pay-per-view buys. And then, there's also Canelo, who, has some good pay-per-view buys when he has a good opponent. But for the most part, the pay-per-view buys from these boxing matches are very low. And the reason, again, is because of the matchups. There's no intriguing matchups. Now, I guarantee you that if Errol Spence were to fight Terence Crawford, they would get more than 1.5 million pay-per-view buys. Because people actually want to see that fight. Okay? But, we all know the history of that fight and Errol Spence not wanting that fight. So it is what it is. But, yeah, so here we see that Jake Paul, I guess, Jake Paul is the new pay-per-view star. If we want to use those numbers, if we were saying that Errol Spence, if these, people are saying Errol Spence is the pay-per-view star, and his highest numbers are 260,000 pay-per-views, then what would you call Jake Paul? A superstar, I guess. Okay, a pay-per-view superstar. Okay. Because look at the numbers, it's more than triple what Errol Spence is doing. And again, these guys, Jake Paul, Ben Askren, they're basically rookies in boxing. Okay, they're beginners. Okay, they're not seasoned professionals who actually get paid at boxing for a living. For a long time. They haven't been doing this for a long time. They just basically started recently. And so we see how far they have progressed in terms of the numbers and the business of the boxing, okay? And then when you have guys like Errol Spence and other people out there, Charlos, Crawford, people who are actual boxers, they're not getting these kind of numbers. And, the reason is very simple, and it's a very simple fix. Make the fights that people want to see. It's just that simple, okay? Make the fights that people want to see, and the numbers will definitely go up. Okay, and that's all that needs to be done. Okay, that's it. And until then, the boxing numbers, the pay-per-view buys are going to continue to be in the toilet. Okay, they're not going to go up unless we get people to get the fight they want to see. People will pay for what they want. Okay, if they don't want something, they're not going to pay for it. And we see that they're not paying for these boxing matches because they don't want the fights that people have, that they've been getting from Top Rank and PBC and these other boxing organizations out there. So it is what it is. But yeah, very interesting situation here. Okay, so it looks like there's a new pay-per-view star, and I guess if if Errol Spence and Jake Paul was to fight, then Jake Paul will be the A side, right? According to the calculations, we're hearing from the LDBC fanboys out there in terms of the Crawford and Spence, they're saying that because his pay-per-view numbers, then Errol Spence is the A side and he should demand 60-40. So if we go by these numbers, okay, with Jake Paul and Errol Spence, let's just say for that these guys are supposed to fight and they're gonna have a fight. Let's say the next fight is gonna be Jake Paul versus Errol Spence. Okay, I mean we just this is not a serious thing. We're just saying, okay, let's just say that we're gonna fight next. Then that would mean that Errol Spence, by the LDBC and the fanboy calculation, that would mean that Jake Paul would get 80-20. He would deserve 80-20 against Errol Spence, right? I mean, his numbers are triple what Errol Spence's. Okay, so that would mean that Jake Paul would get 80% and Errol Spence would get 20%. I mean, that would be realistic based on these guys' calculation for the Crawford Spence fight based on their pay-per-view numbers, right? So it is what it is. I mean, it's funny as hell. But anyway, boxing needs to step up their game. These promoters need to actually do their job and make these fights. And then when they make the fights, they need to promote the fights. And they also need to have, some other forms of entertainment, pre-fight entertainment as well, and they, and they probably need to have more intriguing people to announce the fights. There's a lot of things they need to do, but the main thing that they need to do is to have the fights that people want to see. Okay, simple as that. They need to make the fights that people want to see, and all these fights, we have a lot of fights coming up next. We have the Charlo, we have Jamal Charlo is fighting somebody next. Montiel. I mean, who's that? Are people going to come out to see that fight? If that was a pay-per-view fight, would people pay to see it? More than likely not. So, I mean, there could be a lot more pay-per-view fights in boxing, okay, where the fighters actually make more money, but these fights need to be fights that people want to see, okay? People would pay to see Charlo versus Andrade, Boo Boo Andrade, who just fought Liam Williams, people would pay to see that fight, okay? But it's been like 5 years and that fight still hasn't been made yet. So the question is, why not? What are these boxers really doing? I mean, do you want to make money in boxing, or you just want to make enough to get by? Or you satisfy what you're getting paid, from these fights? I mean, what are they really doing? Okay, I mean, there's big money out there, as we can see from the Jake Paul situation. Okay, there's money out there to be made. But these boxers don't want to make it because they're not making the fights that people want to see, and the promoters are not making the fights that people want to see. So, I mean, these boxers could be making a lot more money than they're making now. But I don't know. I guess a lot of these guys just want to sit on their titles and, hold on to their title instead of making good fights that people want to see. I mean, you're not going to be champion forever. You're going to, I mean, these guys got to, go out there and make the fights that people want to see, or else, they got nothing to complain about, at the end of the day. But, what can I say? It is what it is. And it looks like, Triller is going to be making more waves in boxing, and they might, end up taking over boxing, just like the way, the way Apple took over music from the music industry. A computer company who became the biggest music seller in the business simply because simply because the music industry refused to accept, progress, and didn't want to, when MP3 came around and music download came around, they tried to fight it instead of embracing it. And the rest is history. Now you have Apple be the biggest music seller around, iTunes, and these music companies, they gotta go to Apple. They gotta put their artists on Apple. They could be the one controlling the music, like Apple is doing right now, but they didn't embrace, technology, and they didn't embrace what was going on. So at the end of the day, we hear a lot of talk about apps. Like when DAZN came out, you got a lot of these guys in boxing talking about, oh, DAZN is just an app. The fan and the blue blood sports of the world. Or DAZN is just an app, and nobody want to fight on an app. Well, Triller is an app. Okay, DAZN is doing very well now since they came out, and Triller is doing spectacular. So what this talk about nobody want to fight in the app, like these pundits were talking about, it's nonsense. I mean, I don't know, man. These guys don't have a clue. But anyway, as you can see, like I said, Triller is the app, and they're doing very well. And now we are having people out here talking about how they would love to fight on Triller. We saw, Regis Prograis talk about how Triller treated them and how, it's pay, and about how he loves it, working with Triller. And I think that's gonna be, where the boxing is headed, for the future. But these guys, if they wanna go that route in terms of, their boxing career, they're gonna have to make fights that people want to see. Okay. And I think that, that's what's, the future of boxing at this moment right now. But again, for the boxing, I mean, it's not the end of the day, it's not the end of the world for boxing, generally speaking. They just have to start making fights that people want to see. Boxing is around, it's not going anywhere. But they just have to make the fights that people want to see. And, that's what they really need to do to compete. So even to compete with MMA, which they can't really compete with when it comes to pay-per-view buys, MMA is out, performing boxing when it comes to numbers with pay-per-view. So boxing is in a slump right now, and the people leading in boxing right now, like the Errol Spencers, the Terrence Crawford. Well, actually, at welterweight, it's Errol Spence. He's the one they call the big fish. So he's the head of the leading the welterweight division. He got he's supposedly carrying the welterweight division. So it is what it is. We see where the welterweight division is right now. With guys like that at the head. So not really doing that well when it comes to numbers, and it had nothing to do with the pandemic. Okay, as people were talking about, people not doing good numbers because of the pandemic. No, it had nothing to do with the pandemic. There's more people inside to watch boxing now than before the pandemic. The only thing the pandemic really affects is the gate, but it shouldn't affect the numbers, pay-per-view buy, because more people are home and they can watch. So again, it's the fights that they're putting on that people don't really want to see. Okay, so it is what it is. But anyway, I'm not gonna take too long on this video. We see, the question has to be, asked: who is the real pay-per-view star, Errol Spence or Jake Paul? I'll let you answer that in the comments. But so that's all I have for right now. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share the videos. This is TBE Boxing. That's all I have for right now. I'm out.